It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth. In an era of chaos, confusion, and craziness, Ferenc is a voice for common sense. As a financial literacy educator, speaker, and entrepreneur, Ferenc cuts through the noise to help us understand how current events affect our money, economy, and our freedom. Now, here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. Of cash, both in terms of total dollars and percentage of assets. In fact, he is now sitting on nearly $350 billion in cash, which is larger than the combined cash holdings of Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. So that gives you an idea of how significant amount of money that Berkshire Hathaway is sitting in cash. And recently, at the annual meeting, he was asked why he is sitting on so much cash. And as he stated, he doesn't see many attractive investments these days. He believes one day Berkshire will be bombarded with opportunities that we will be glad to have the cash for. Now, it's not too difficult to think about and realize if Warren Buffett believes that Berkshire Hathaway is going to have tremendous opportunities to buy stock in the future, he's a well-known value investor. Therefore, he understands or believes prices will be lower at some point in the future. Otherwise, he wouldn't be sitting on this amount of cash, and he would not have made the statement that he believes opportunities will present themselves in the future and that they will be glad they have the cash available to purchase. One of the other key questions asked of Warren Buffett at the recent annual meeting was what he thought about the market volatility over the past 100 days. And his statement was, it's really nothing. It is not a huge move. This has not been a dramatic bear market or anything of the sort. This is the quote from Warren Buffett. We've had extreme volatility recently. It's been caused primarily by the uncertainty of tariff policies and of the recent tariff policies, and not so much that Wall Street is against them per se, it's the uncertainty of knowing what is going to end up happening. And Wall Street hates uncertainty. So it's gone up, it's gone down, it's recovered. It's been a stomach churning ride for many people. But again, according to Warren Buffett, he believes that there are not many attractive investments to invest in currently, and that there will be better opportunities to purchase in the future, which by definition means lower prices. That would generally mean a correction in the market. This is what Warren Buffett believes by his statements and his actions. Ignore one of the greatest investors in history at your peril. I would pay attention to what Warren Buffett is saying and doing. Certainly reducing your risk, your market risk to the downside would be key. Increasing your liquidity, having access to cash, much as Warren Buffett has done, would be wise to take advantage of the likely upcoming opportunities that Warren Buffett sees on the horizon. The other key point I want to make about this is the recent volatility has been caused. Much of the recent volatility has been caused by the uncertainty of tariff policies. I've been listening to a number of Treasury Secretary Howard Lutnick's interviews. The more I listen to this guy, the more I like him. He's well respected in Wall Street, in the investment community. That's no secret. He's clarified in some of his recent interviews the goals of the Trump tariff policies. For example, he has stated that the United States is not looking for a total decoupling with China. What we're the goal is to accomplish a partial decoupling. In other words, the Trump administration wants to reshore manufacturing on critical items that we as a country need or rely on. Things like medicines, computer chips, steel manufacturing, etc. Things that affect our national security or our citizens. And as he stated, The COVID shutdowns was a great beta test to show us what would happen if supply chains got interfered with. President Trump told him and the cabinet that this can never be allowed to happen again. The things that we need as a country, we need to manufacture here, or at least enough of it to support our country, our citizens. I've shared on this show a number of times that the United States does not have the capacity to manufacture the antibiotics that are required for our citizens. We also do not have the shipbuilding capability to support our commercial or military shipping needs. We're unable to produce the high-end computer chips needed for many military and high-end production requirements. These are national security issues. He went on to clarify the focus of the Trump tariff policy in regards to manufacturing of items that are not critical. The media has been recently attacking the tariff policies using examples of children not being able to receive as many toys, for example, for Christmas. And as Howard Lucknick said, we're not looking to interfere with that. If they want to produce toys or shoes, I used the example of rubber ducks with a client recently. Howard Lucknick's response was, let them have at it. Obviously, China and other countries have lower labor costs and can produce items like that much cheaper than what can be produced in the United States. So all manufacturing is not going to be brought back to the United States, but the focus is, again, on critical items, necessary items, items that affect our national security. As he pointed out, high precision manufacturing, things like that. And that makes sense because you have to have a higher skilled workforce. Those tend to be higher paying jobs for those types of manufacturing jobs. Taiwan Semiconductor recently made a statement that about 10% of their production cost of high-end computer chips is labor. With a 10% tariff, they pointed out that nullifies the difference or the increased cost of manufacturing in the United States. With a 10% labor cost and a 10% tariff, it costs them the same to produce a high-end computer chip in the United States versus outside of the United States. It's that type of manufacturing that the Trump administration is looking to bring back to the United States. And that's a tremendous thing because one other point in a recent interview, Treasury Secretary Howard Lucknick pointed out, if you want to increase wages, one of the best ways to do so is through manufacturing jobs, not service jobs. Service jobs tend to pay less. High-end manufacturing jobs producing cars, ships, steel, high-end computer chips, etc. Those types of manufacturing jobs tend to be more high-skilled and pay much more, and that far more effectively brings up overall wage growth. So it's a partial decoupling from China and the rest of the world they're looking at accomplishing through targeted manufacturing of the items, again, that are important and critical for our country. And I can use an example I've shared before with a friend of mine from college who shortly after college, he got a job in manufacturing painting boats. He then went on after some years to other jobs, but more recently, he's come back to the original company now as a welder. In fact, he doesn't weld the boats. He actually has gotten certified, has done this for several years now. He runs a computer welding robot. It's a high-end certification, and as he points out, he gets paid triple of what he used to get paid. The robot does the welding, but it can't do it by itself. It needs an operator, and that requires a certain level of skill and certification to accomplish that. That's the type of manufacturing jobs that the Trump administration is looking to bring back to the United States. And the other argument I hear oftentimes from people is, well, the Americans don't want to work these manufacturing jobs. I know of slews of people who jump at the opportunity to work at those types of jobs, particularly if you're looking in middle America. You get away from the coasts and the major cities, you will find a lot of people that would be more than happy to work in a high paying, skilled manufacturing job. That's a misnomer. That's a common misconception that people on the East and West Coast and in some of the big cities have. I've often stated this. Just get out, drive an hour outside of any major city, and you will find rural areas and small towns that are a hollow shell of what they once were just a few decades ago. And a big part of that is because of the loss of good paying jobs, manufacturing that used to occur in the United States. Official numbers have shown that the United States, since NAFTA was signed in 1993, that we as a country have lost over 90,000 factories and over 5 million manufacturing jobs. If the Trump administration is successful at bringing back even a portion of that, and those tend to be higher skilled, higher paying manufacturing jobs, you will see an economic change in this country unlike we've seen in decades. I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment. I'm going to share some thoughts from a client of mine who shared information on a high-end financial conference that occurred recently that I think you'll find very interesting. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. I have an advantage that most people in this country do not have, and I realize that. I speak to clients and potential clients who reach out to me through this radio show from coast to coast, all walks of life, all income levels, all ages, all types of backgrounds. It's truly a cross section of America. In our family, it's often a joke because I meet most of these people through Zoom meetings, etc. And it's very common for me to be talking to somebody in Florida in the morning and California in the afternoon. And this is a daily occurrence for me. I enjoy meeting people, getting to know them, finding out what their goals and what their what they want to accomplish in life, where they want to be, help them accomplish that, enhance their financial future, those types of things. My purpose is to listen and try to figure out a better solution for you, a better way to enhance your financial future and accomplish your goals. And in doing that, I found out a lot about people, their backgrounds. I've got clients who have worked with Elon Musk directly, to others who are in the high-end financial business and deal with millionaires and billionaires on a regular basis, and everything in between. And one of my clients recently shared with me some interesting information. He attended a high-end financial conference. It was invitation only. There were many hedge fund managers in the room, etc. Most people in the room were multimillionaires, number of billionaires. And one of the speakers asked a question at this conference regarding what their perception was about the economy with the tariff policy situation, all that's going on, the recent volatility in the markets. And he asked how many were bullish on the economy and the stock market over the next 6 months. And he stated almost no one in the room was bullish. They were pretty negative. And then the speaker asked, well, what about the next year? And he shared that maybe about a third of the room felt pretty positive about it, but the majority did not. Then he asked, how about in the next 2 years? And he said the overwhelming majority, easily 80% plus, felt positive about the economy in the next 2 years. And then when the speaker asked 3 years, it was nearly 100% were positive about the economy, the market, the tariff policies, and all of this. Now, understand, in this room, this was not a room full of Trump supporters. In fact, a number of those people were openly negative towards Trump. Yet, despite the fact that they did not necessarily like Trump or his policies per se, they admitted that they were bullish on the economy and the effects of the tariffs and the markets and all that kind of stuff in the next couple of years. This gives you an idea of what the experts, the people that are putting their money on the line, really think about what's going on. I've shared this myself a number of times on this show. In the short term, I believe there's going to be a lot of volatility. We've seen this already. I believe that will continue until some of these trade deals get settled out. Wall Street hates uncertainty. Now, the reality is most countries have already or are come to the table in renegotiating trade deals with the United States. Most of those are going to be favorable. The real holdout, Howard Lutnick has pointed this out also in several recent interviews. He's our Treasury Secretary, that the one missing piece was China, and that is a big missing piece. But recently they have agreed to talks with the United States. This is a positive development. Hopefully, good will come of it. China does have a history of negotiating, taking time to negotiate. They like to go through a process. They tend to move very slowly through that process. So the fact they're willing to talk, that's a positive development. That's good news. But it's unlikely. I wouldn't pin a lot of hopes on them coming to a resolution quickly. That's just not China's way. That's not how they operate. It's not how they think. Hopefully it's the beginning of something good, but it could easily be a 6 to 12-month process before a final resolution on a deal with China occurs. I hope it's quicker, frankly, for everyone concerned, but it could take some time. Like I said, that's the most likely scenario. In the meantime, the markets, the economy, and such will be uncertain, and we'll see continued volatility, most likely. In the first segment, I also shared where Warren Buffett believes, based on his actions of moving to a significant amount of cash and his statements about opportunities, having that cash available for opportunities in the future, he believes there's going to be a correction. The charts demonstrate that. History demonstrates that. To ignore that fact, I would say, is foolish financially. Ignore at your peril. The wise financial move for most people would be to do some protection of the downside. Your personal bank, annuities, guaranteed income riders can be great tools to accomplish that, allowing you to earn some income, earn some returns on your money, protect the downside while you're waiting for the next opportunity. Your personal bank in particular, with its high liquidity, would allow you to take advantage of those opportunities when they do occur. And opportunities will occur. It's just a matter of time. Now, in the meantime, one of the reasons we haven't gone into a recession is that the wealthy consumers have been continuing to spend. Consumer spending is about 2/3 of gross domestic product, or GDP. Now, the better off don't love the high prices. They are starting to feel more uncertain, but so far, at least, they are continuing to spend through it. Now, the lower and middle income people have, in many cases, been forced to pull back on their spending due to inflation, increased interest rates, the higher cost, whether it's rent, food, gas, mortgages, interest, you name it. Walmart and McDonald's, for example, have come out recently stating that high-income shoppers are continuing to boost their sales, and they're seeing more and more of a divided economy, a bifurcated economy, if you will. You have the more wealthy consumers continuing to carry on and boost the spending, boost the economy, while there are others, the other half are not. The the lower and middle income folks are not. Wall Street Journal estimated that the top 10% of households, which are those that are making 250,000 a year or more, accounted for half of all spending. Now 30 years ago, they only accounted for a third. Been a shift of the higher income earners taking on more and more of the spending percentage. One of the key economic indicators to pay attention to going forward will be, will the higher income households continue to spend as they have, or will they start to pull back based on various concerns that may occur going forward? That's going to be something that's going to need to be watched closely. Now, when it comes to groceries, in fact, 9 in 10 Americans are changing how they shop for groceries to save money. Oftentimes, this even affects folks that are earning over $100,000 a year. In fact, some of the study has pointed out that 85% of households earning more than 100 grand a year say they have adjusted their food shopping to reduce their overall costs. So, according to this Lending Tree survey, feeling the pain in the grocery store, you're not alone. They state that despite the fact that Americans tend to be fairly brand loyal, when inflation is rising, budgets get tighter, and upwards of 90% have been forced to make decisions and sacrifices regarding their grocery shopping. In this study, they also point out that 59% of Americans indicate they are eating out less frequently these days. And when they do splurge, about half of consumers state that this is affecting their tipping habits. 30% report that they are tipping less than usual. These things are just pointing out the continuing bifurcated economy that is occurring, where the higher income earners are spending similar to what they have before, have not adjusted, the top 10%, while the rest of America, the middle and lower income earners, are shifting their purchasing habits, have done so already. It's going to be interesting to see how this evolves going forward if this continues. Again, the reshoring of manufacturing jobs, high paying, skilled manufacturing jobs, has the potential to offset some of this bifurcation of the economy and consumer spending. That's why I was stating in the first segment, this could have a tremendous economic impact on our economy going forward. But as most experts and most people that really pay attention to this believe, that's not really going to occur probably for it's going to take a year or two for this to really take effect. It's going to take some time. In the meantime, we're going to have a bumpy road. We've seen a lot of volatility in the markets, for example. We're likely going to continue to see more. We're likely going to see corrections, maybe some even very significant corrections in that time frame before the overall economy and the markets and wages start rising again because of these reshoring of these manufacturing jobs, etc., increased tariff income coming into the country, things like that. So in the meantime, what should you do? Protect yourself, reduce the market risk, increase your liquidity, have money available so that when opportunities do present themselves from the next correction that's likely to occur, you can take advantage. Your personal bank allows you to grow your money, insured, guaranteed, tax-free, and highly liquid. It's a tremendous tool to park some of your portfolio, some of your money, while you're waiting for better opportunities. You don't have to ride the roller coaster all the way up or all the way down for that matter. At least not all your money. Having it the majority at risk or too high a percentage, let's say, can be detrimental, even devastating to a portfolio or to an investment plan or to someone's financial future. If you want to look at an alternative or consider ways to reduce your risk and create more opportunities for yourself when this volatility, these changes occur, and folks, we're going through tremendous economic change with the tariff policies, the reshoring of manufacturing. This is generational type change stuff, folks. If you want to be better positioned to take advantage of that, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Stay tuned in the next segment. I want to discuss housing and property taxes, and I think you're going to find some of what I'm going to share very interesting, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. I saw this article here recently from Newsweek titled America's Property Tax Headache. And I think I find it very interesting because this is something I've been discussing off and on, but I don't really hear anybody else really talking about. And that is rising property taxes over the past 5 years have really exacerbated American homeowners' housing affordability. According to Redfin, nationwide property taxes have increased by nearly 30% over the past 5-year period. This is something I hear from folks all the time, and this is a basic financial literacy concept. I'll hear someone who owns their home, and they'll discuss oftentimes where the value of their property has gone up, and they're happy about that. I often ask them a couple of simple questions. First of all, I ask them, is this your primary residence or an investment property? In other words, are you planning to sell anytime in the near future? And in most cases, that type of answer is no. I said, then why would you be happy that your property value has gone up? All that means is you're going to have to pay more in property tax. In fact, unless you want to sell your property, you really don't want the value of it to go up because, again, you're just going to have more taxes. The real value of a personal residence is that if it goes up in value over time and eventually at some point you sell it, say in retirement, and downsize to something less expensive. Well, recently that hasn't worked out so well for seniors either because they have their home, for example, with a low, more interest rate mortgage or maybe paid off. If you're a senior and you want to downsize, and let's say you have one of those low interest rate mortgages, the problem is if you go to buy a new home, it's going to cost a lot. Granted, you could sell your current home for much more, most likely, if you owned it for some time, than what you paid for it. But the new place is going to cost far more than you realize in most cases. And if you have a mortgage, the interest rate on that new mortgage is going to be much, much higher. Now, if the home is paid off and you can pay cash, okay, great. That's certainly helpful. And for many people, that's not necessarily the case. That's not where they're at financially. So unless your home is paid off and you can pay cash for the next one, the increases in value is not really helping you so much because of the high mortgage costs. Also, if you're on a fixed income in retirement or whatever, increasing property taxes can be detrimental, devastating even. That's the point of this article. And I've shared on this show before, I have a real problem with property tax in general, the entire concept of it. And here's why. If you have to pay property tax for your home to live in, and if you don't pay the property tax for some reason, the government can come in and take it from you. Well, my question is simple. Do you really own that property? There are many countries in this world that have no property tax, some of them very successful, very wealthy, and do very well. So property taxes are not necessary. There can be other sources of revenue for governments. But here's the reality. The basic concept is, again, if you fail to pay the government the property tax, they can throw you out. Do you truly own your property, or are you in essence renting it from the government? And I've been traveling recently, and I was in a couple of small towns in Vermont. Now, Vermont is not known for low property taxes. Most of New England is not. But I found it obnoxious that in two towns I was in recently, in the town square, on the county courthouse, they had banners up stating property taxes due this Friday. They're very serious about their property tax here in Vermont. They want them paid, obviously. And what I find so ironic is some of these small towns were the birthplace of freedom. They're the birthplace of the American Revolution. No taxation without representation. Remember that? Something called the Boston Tea Party, because they had a half a penny tax on tea and they threw the tea out. It evolved into a shooting war, primarily over taxes. Yet these are the same places today that are now putting up banners saying pay your property tax by this date. The unstated part of that is you better pay up or else, because we're going to take it from you if you don't. Also, I saw I believe the Vermont state Senate passed the bill increasing property taxes by another 1% across the board, across statewide. So not only are the property taxes been going up significantly across the country, they're increasing them further because property values have increased. And by golly, you better pay them or else. Is that freedom? Is that ownership? Personally, I don't think so. And I think property taxes should be abolished. They shouldn't be allowed. And certainly, my gosh, a good place to start. How about eliminating property taxes for retirees? They've paid their taxes throughout their lifetime. Anything from payroll taxes, gas tax, income tax, you name it. We're overtaxed by far. And as we all know from many of the actions much of the fraud that Doge has exposed recently, much of the money that these governments are receiving is being wasted anyway. And I just find it obnoxious and egregious. You cannot own a property without having to pay some government entity every year to give you the right to live there. That's the definition of rent, isn't it? I hope more people wake up to this idea, because I would love to see that change in our country. It could be done if enough people realized and thought about it and started demanding real change. Now, some of the reasons why these ideas are not shared, this financial literacy type stuff is not common, is there so much propaganda at work out there, particularly in the legacy media. In fact, USAID, some of the latest numbers now, funneled $34 million of U.S. taxpayer money to Politico, $50 million to the New York Times, $19 million to AP, $9 million to Reuters, and $3 million to BBC. Now, why in the world? That's the British Broadcasting Network. Why does USAID need to spend taxpayer money to pay for propaganda from the BBC? I mean, it's bad enough they're manipulating the narrative on U.S. media companies. The reality is that's government-sponsored media. There's no two ways about it. Those media companies getting that kind of money, New York Times receiving $50 million, do you think they're going to say from the government? Do you think they're going to say anything negative about the government? Hardly. Yeah, that's just not realistic. And that's when you start to understand that type of thing, the agenda that these legacy media companies have, that's why you have this Venezuelan illegal gang member, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who's been documented now by two judges as a gang member. He's an illegal alien. It's been documented by police video when he got pulled over transporting other illegals. The president of Venezuela has confirmed that he's a gang member. He's a Venezuelan citizen, by the way, not a U.S. citizen. He's an illegal alien. So his president has confirmed he's a gang member. But 96% of legacy media coverage of Kilmar Abrego Garcia was positive. while 96% of legacy media coverage of Elon Musk and Doge is negative. Now, Garcia is an illegal gang member, and Elon Musk is exposing government theft. Yet the government gave $50 million to New York Times, for example. Now do you understand why they're on the side of the illegal gang member? They don't want, their real enemy is Doge, Elon Musk, because they're exposing this government theft and fraud. And this $50 million that the New York Times received likely is going to go away. They're not going to receive anymore. But it even gets worse than that. Doge used an example of taxpayer dollars going to alpaca farming in Peru and improving the marketability of peas in Guatemala. Now, why our taxpayer dollars would be going to those things is unfathomable. But it actually gets worse. It turns out that most of the money that was marked for these grants never even made it out of D.C. So the reality is they were just frauds in the first place. Why somebody approved a grant like that is fraudulent in the first place. But the second level of fraud is the money never left D.C. The organizations, the non-governmental organizations that received the grants to improve alpaca farming in Peru never actually helped the alpacas or the marketability of peas in Guatemala. They just kept the money, or most of it. So it was a grift. It was a fraud. It was embezzlement. These are felonies. These kind of things have done in any other organization or any other place. People would be in jail. They would be serving jail. They'd be serving jail time. And unfortunately, a significant chunk of our tax dollars and our debt have gone to this type of fraud and abuse and criminality. So it gets really frustrating when you have to pay all these taxes, whether it's income tax or gas tax or property tax or whatever. We're way, way overtaxed. It'd be one thing if it was used efficiently. There was some fiscal responsibility involved. There was some accountability, and it was going to things that would benefit the country, the citizens. But when you see just the level of unaccountability, fraud, waste, criminality, and you worked hard for those dollars, and now you've got to pay them in and realize so much of those got wasted, wow, that's a level of frustration that's hard to describe. Again, I'm not calling for any violence or anything like that. I want to be very clear. You do need to understand, I am a student of history, and that's how our country started. That's how the American Revolution initially started, was over these types of things, taxation without representation. We're living at a time of bureaucracy, a government that doesn't listen, people that are defrauding us, yet taxing us at levels, unprecedented levels. It could be defined as taxation without representation. Stay tuned in the last segment. I got a few thoughts about retirement advice and what the magic number is to retire comfortably. I think you'll find my perspective interesting, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. That's yourpersonalbank.com. I find it interesting that you find research, and these companies will come out with what they believe is the magic number that Americans believe they need to retire comfortably. And it turns out this year that number is about 1.26 million. Now, first of all, the vast majority of people do not save that amount of money for retirement. That's just statistical fact. Now, if you have higher cost of living areas like California, the magic number, according to these studies, is closer to 1.5 million. I find these surveys and these magic numbers, per se, very deceiving, oftentimes disheartening, most commonly more detrimental than beneficial. Again, the fact of the matter is the vast majority of Americans never achieve those types of numbers, and some just look at it as unattainable and just give up. And like, what's the point? So it's discouraging. But another thing that I find interesting, if you truly understand retirement, the needs for retirement, it's not about a number. It's not about an amount you need to have invested. That's a mistake that most people make. And this is again, a basic financial literacy concept. I like to share these concepts because, as I stated, I used to teach a college certified financial literacy course for a period of time. Retirement is not about a number. Retirement is about income. Let me use an example. The 4% withdrawal rule is a commonly used rule that if you have a portfolio that's invested, like say in a 60-40 stock bond mix that's often recommended, it's recommended in retirement you start off with a 4% withdrawal rate. Relatively safely, be able to not run out of money in retirement. Well, if you had $1 million, for example, invested, if you took a 4% withdrawal rate, you would withdraw $40,000. Now, if $40,000 was your number of what you needed to supplement retirement, let's say you had Social Security and maybe some other income sources, if you were going to invest in the markets, do the 60-40 portfolio split, which is taught by modern portfolio theory, yes, you would need to invest or save $1 million in the markets to do that. How do you come up with 40,000 income? Well, one simple solution I can tell you is guaranteed income riders. Depending on your age, when you want to start earning the income, we have accounts that'll pay 5, 6, 7% withdrawal rates guaranteed for life, which means you cannot outlive the money. Now, if you have a 5, 6, 7%, let's use a 6% withdrawal rate. Again, it depends on your age, but that's 50% more available withdrawal rate, or 50% more money you could receive, guaranteed for the rest of your life, guaranteed for life. So if you did have the same $1 million invested somewhere, you could use the 4% withdrawal rate and receive 40,000, or you could take the guaranteed income rider and receive 60,000 income. The difference, though, is, again, guaranteed for life. You can't outlive the money. Would that make some sense to increase your income by 50% and guarantee it never runs out? Well, if you think about that, of course it would. Now, maybe you may not want to do all of your income that way, but a certain portion of it would make sense in most cases. This is typically not recommended or discussed because of lack of understanding or competition or various reasons. But again, to fail to look at the options and consider them for yourself is poor financial planning. It's unwise. If you're looking to increase your income and you'd like to guarantee it for the rest of your life, you should contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. This is the golden era of fixed assets. We're seeing better, stronger numbers than we've seen in over 40 years. You could significantly increase your income for retirement, guaranteed, versus the standard recommended 4% withdrawal rule that's often bandied about. And I guess that also kind of leads me to this other article I found very interesting, where they stated 12 reasons retirement advice from Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman may not work for you. The number one point they make is both Ramsey and Orman often speak in absolutes. They often advise that you should take a certain action regardless of your circumstances. I've said this 1,000 times. The blanket approach may be fine for some, but could be totally wrong for you. Whenever somebody makes a blanket statement, understand it may or may not apply for you. It may or may not be the best option for you. Also, when you have any financial advisor or talking head out there telling you should do this or that without equivocation, oftentimes it really shows they're more about their bias than it does about really advice that would benefit you or fit your situation. The black and white approach. I've often shared this. Dave Ramsey is famous for making statements about paying off debt. Now, granted, I'm fully in favor of paying high interest consumer debt. No question. I don't think anyone would be against that. Any high interest debt you really want to get rid of, especially when interest rates or borrowing rates are higher. Secondly, if you have to work for that income to pay that debt, whether you own the business or you go to work for a living, doesn't matter whether you're a high income earner or not, if you have to expend time and energy to pay that bill, if you're unable to do that for some reason, that's when you get in trouble. What if your income gets impacted? What if you lose your job? What if your business is impacted negatively? What if you have a health issue? All these are scenarios that could negatively impact you financially. So, yes, getting rid of that type of debt where you have to work for it, absolutely you should get rid of as soon as possible. But there's also something called strategic debt. And a very common example most people understand is assume you were to purchase a rental property, a buy and hold long term rental. You used a mortgage to purchase it. In other words, you leveraged, you used debt. You put a down payment, but you borrowed the rest. Now, as long as your income is greater than your expenses, that's known as positive cash flow. Can you build wealth that way? And the answer is, of course you can. And we all know of examples of people who have built wealth using that tool through real estate. Yet, blanket statements of getting out of debt, period, ignore those opportunities of using strategic debt to build wealth. Your personal bank works on the similar concept. The only difference is we're using money to get positive arbitrage. In other words, we're earning more in dividends than when we access the money through policy loans or bank lines of credit, and we're keeping the difference, the positive arbitrage or the positive cash flow. We're using money as leverage instead of real estate. It's the same principle. Again, if you're just focused on paying off debt as a blanket statement, you ignore that opportunity. And some people will say, well, I'm afraid of the debt. It's pounded in our head to pay off debt, right? Well, if you have the discipline to pay off debt, wouldn't you have the same discipline to operate strategic debt to your benefit? The answer is in most cases, of course you would. It's not about the debt, it's about the discipline. It's about you understanding how to have compound interest work in your favor versus compound interest working to your detriment through debt. Debt can hurt you. Compound interest gaining benefits you. We all know that. It's to learn the discipline and the process to succeed. I had a recent conversation with a very successful client of mine who's done a lot of real estate business over the last decade or so. And she's gone through some challenges recently financially due to the increased interest rates, etc. She was in a state where it was a very renter-friendly state. So when COVID shutdowns happened, and as she put it, renters were basically told they didn't have to pay. She had difficulty removing them. She had a lot of financial difficulties in that. But then she made a statement I thought was interesting. And she said, it's hard to know. There's different schools of thought out there. Much like these black and white advice we often hear from talking heads, advisors, whatever. She said these two schools of thought, cash flow versus being debt free. And I said to her, the problem that we run into is the blanket advice doesn't always work in the situation. And what I mean by this is during a low interest rate environment, cheap money, low cost of borrowing, cash flow can work tremendously in your favor, can be tremendously profitable. You can get tremendous positive arbitrage, have your money work for you. It's cheap to borrow money to go make more. So the cash flow train of thought is very successful in that type of environment. But when the interest rates change, the cost of borrowing increases dramatically, like we've seen in the last 3 years, paying off debt becomes the more effective tool. because the cost of borrowing has gone up so much more. The ability to make a profit and earn becomes more difficult or more challenging or more limited. So it's not that the schools of thought are both either right or wrong. They're right for certain economic situations and not for others, or better for one versus the other. So as I pointed out to her, the true way to think about money and business and your finances and all that is how adaptable are you? Business owners understand this inherently. If you don't adapt to changing business environment, you go out of business. You have to be able to adjust and adapt. In a low interest environment, cheap borrowing of money, the ability to generate cash flow is great. But then when that changes, when interest rates go up, the cost of borrowing goes up, the cost of money goes up, the ability to pay down debt, in other words, be flexible, that's key to being successful in that environment. You have to be adaptable. Statement I would make oftentimes, and I do with many of my business owner clients, is evolve or die. You don't want to be a dinosaur. You have to change with the times. And the one last thought I want to leave with you today is the tariff policies that the Trump administration is embarking on, the reshoring of critical and high-end manufacturing. This is creating economic change, massive economic change that we have not seen for decades. You have to adapt. You have to evolve, or you will become a dinosaur too. If you want more information on how you can navigate this changing economic environment, how to maximize your returns, maximize your liquidity, maximize your adaptability, minimize your market risk, minimize your taxes, minimize your debt, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Stay tuned next week to the Your Personal Bank Show for more great information. As long as it's on our money, in God we trust.
Listen Tuesdays at noon and Saturdays at 1 to the Your Personal Bank Show for more information. Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guests of this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Some products discussed may have limitations and not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Dividend rates and bank line of credit rates may change. For current rates, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. Again, that's 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com.